The morning fog clung to Vallon Harbour like a secret waiting to be told. Commander Sabrina Hartley adjusted the wheel of her 26-foot cutter, Sea Whisper, as she approached Dock 4 in the pre-dawn darkness. The vessel bore no military markings, just her name painted in small, pale letters on the stern. That was intentional. At 42, Sabrina had spent the last 15 years climbing through the ranks of Naval Systems Command, earning her position as the highest-ranking systems officer in the fleet through sheer competence and an almost supernatural ability to remain calm under pressure. Today's mission was critical, field testing the new NavSys autonomous navigation system in real harbour conditions, away from the bureaucratic oversight that often corrupted data. She had filed her authorization at 400 hours, embedding it deep in the system logs where only those who knew how to look would find it. The test required absolute discretion. Too many previous trials had been compromised by brass wanting photo ops and politicians seeking headlines. As Sea Whisper glided toward the restricted dock, Sabrina cut the throttle and let momentum carry her into position. Her movements were precise, almost ritualistic, tying off the bowline with swift, confident hands, adjusting the fender, checking the NavSys panel one final time. The system had performed flawlessly, its soft blue glow indicating successful data collection. She stood at the dock's edge, breathing in the salt air and watching the first blade of sunlight pierce the horizon. Everything was going according to plan. The harbour remained quiet, undisturbed, exactly as she'd intended, but as she turned back toward her vessel, the sound of boots echoed across the wooden planks. Two figures emerged from the patrol shed, their silhouettes sharp against the morning light. Something in their stride told her this wasn't a routine check. Officer Derek Renner spotted the small vessel the moment he stepped outside, his coffee still steaming in the crisp air. Beside him, Officer Marcus Tager finished buttoning his patrol jacket, already reaching for his gloves. "Somebody's lost," Tager muttered, eyeing the plain boat with obvious disdain. Too small, too quiet. No proper transponder signal either. They approached with the casual confidence of men who'd done this routine 100 times before. Neither bothered to check their logs or verify dock assignments. In their minds, Dock 4 was their territory, and this woman, whoever she was, didn't belong. The first warning sign should have been her composure. Most trespassers stammered, made excuses, or tried to flee. This woman simply turned to face them, her expression calm and unbothered, as if she'd been expecting this exact moment all along. "First contact, ma'am. This is a restricted dock," Renner announced, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. "You can't moor here without proper authorization." "Identification, please." Sabrina studied both officers for a moment, taking in their body language, their positioning, the way Tagert's hand already rested near his belt. She'd commanded men in war zones who showed more restraint than these, two displayed in their own harbour. "My authorization is embedded in the system log," she replied quietly, each word deliberate and measured, "filed at 0400 hours. Tagert snorted, sharing a knowing look with his partner. "System log." "Lady, this isn't some laptop rental pier. Dock 4. Is military restricted? You're trespassing." Renner stepped closer, his tone hardening. "What's your name?" "And don't make me ask again." Without sudden movements or visible tension, Sabrina reached for the leather satchel resting near the helm. The moment her hand moved, Renner's fingers went to his weapon. "Don't move!" he barked. She froze, then slowly lifted the satchel by its strap and opened it. Inside was her official ID wallet, crisp and regulation. She extended it toward Renner with, the same calm precision she'd used to hand over coffee to a colleague. René barely glanced at the identification before tossing it onto the deck with theatrical disgust. "This is fake," he declared. "You're claiming to be some commander of what, Navsis?" On that piece of junk, the ID lay face up on the fiberglass, morning light catching the official seal. Anyone who bothered to look closely would see the security features, the proper formatting, the photo that matched the woman standing before them. But René and tJudge weren't looking. They'd already decided what they wanted to see. "Step back." "Hands behind your back," René ordered. When Sabrina didn't immediately comply, he shouted, "Now!" The sound startled a gull from the nearby piling, its cry echoing across the still water. Sabrina complied without protest. She stepped back, turned, and placed her wrists behind her, her expression unchanged. She didn't speak, didn't argue, didn't threaten consequences. She simply stood still and waited. The zip ties snapped tight. Too tight. Target stepped aboard Sea Whisper like a man entering his own garage, ready to catalogue his spoils. "Let's see what our commander here's been hiding," he muttered, beginning his systematic destruction of everything she'd worked to protect. In that moment, as Sabrina knelt on the dock with her face pressed to the fiberglass, the real test began. Not of her navigation system, but of something far more fundamental: how power behaves when it believes no one is watching. The humiliation people had started to gather now. 3 men on paddleboards had pulled up to the end of the dock, curious about the commotion. A woman near the fueling station paused with her phone raised, already filming. Someone in a service jacket stood by a bollard, not interfering, but not walking away either. tJudge worked methodically through Sea Whisper's compartments, pulling out emergency blankets, tool rolls, and a compressed life raft, tossing each item onto the dock with theatrical disgust. The careful organization Sabrina had maintained was destroyed in minutes, her equipment scattered like debris from a storm. "You're awfully quiet," René observed, crouching beside her on the dock. His hand pressed down on her shoulder, forcing her chin against the fiberglass. "What happened to all that Navy authority? No threats? No boyfriend coming to save you?" Sabrina's breathing remained steady, in and out, controlled. The zip ties were cutting into her skin now, but she didn't shift position. Her knees burned against the deck, her shoulders ached, but her posture never slumped. She stared at the reflection of the dock post in the calm water, waiting. Then tJudge found the embedded Navsys console. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, yanking the panel open. Cables snapped as he examined the still active screen. The system blinked once, displaying weeks of carefully collected data, before his boot came down hard, the screen shattered with a low pop. Months of development work, irreplaceable test data, destroyed in an instant. Sabrina didn't flinch. "That your command center?" René whistled, impressed by his partner's thoroughness. "Cute. You think you're testing classified tech on our dock?" "Still," she said nothing. The phones in the crowd caught everything: the casual brutality, the systematic destruction, her absolute stillness in the face of it all. tJudge rifled through a dry storage bin next, finding a sealed case containing backup data drives. Without hesitation, he tossed it into the harbor. It sank immediately. "Oops," he said with a grin. René reached for her satchel, the one that had contained her identification. He slung it once by the strap, testing its weight, then flung it into the water where it splashed and disappeared beneath the surface. "You know," René said, crouching beside her again, "we've had all kinds come through here. Men with stripes, kids with fake IDs. but we've never had one walk in like she owns the place. You must be a special kind of crazy. The wind lifted the corner of her jacket and dropped it again. Around them, the crowd watched in stunned silence. Nobody stepped forward, nobody said stop. The footage captured everything. But what the cameras couldn't record was the quality of Sabrina's silence. This wasn't the quiet of defeat or fear. This was the stillness of someone who knew exactly what was happening and exactly why she was, allowing it to continue because soon, very soon, they would understand what they had done. The call for backup. "We're calling backup," Target announced, pulling out his radio.
"Run a secondary sweep. Maybe get her off this piece of junk before she breaks another rule." Renair nodded approvingly. "She'll sit here till they come. Let her think about who she really is." As they waited, more spectators gathered.
The woman with the phone had started live streaming, her viewers asking questions in real time about what they were witnessing. A maintenance worker had paused his rounds to watch. Even some of the marina staff had stepped out from their offices, drawn by the unusual scene. But none of them intervened. The officers' uniforms, their confident demeanor, the official nature of the arrest, it all looked legitimate from a distance. Just another routine enforcement action at the restricted
dock.
Sabrina remained exactly as they'd positioned her, kneeling with her face toward the water, wrists bound behind her back. To the casual observer, she might have looked defeated. But there was something in her posture, a readiness, a coiled energy, that suggested she was simply waiting for the right moment. The radio crackled to life. Unit 47, backup requested at Dock 4. Possible security breach, female subject. Non-compliance with detention protocols. "Copy that," came the response. "Marine 81 Nini. Route. ETA 4 minutes. Renair and Target exchanged satisfied looks. This was how it always ended: overwhelming force, absolute compliance, their authority unquestioned. They'd played this scene dozens of times before with various trespassers and troublemakers. The script never changed, but as the sound of approaching boat engines grew louder across the harbour, something shifted in the air. The quality of the morning light seemed different somehow, sharper. The crowd had grown larger, more attentive. Phones were recording from multiple angles now. The water split cleanly ahead of Marine 81 as the patrol boat surged toward Dock 4, sirens off but engines growling low. Two men in tactical armour gripped the bow rails, eyes locked on the small vessel moored ahead. The call had come in as a possible breach. Unknown female, solo operator, resisting detainment. Protocol demanded escalation. Within seconds, the patrol unit slid up to the dock, ropes flying, boots hitting the wood hard. Weapons were drawn before questions were asked. "Hands where we can see them," the lead officer barked. "Step away from this vessel." "Sir, she's already restrained," one of the original officers explained quickly. "We secured her when she wouldn't cooperate." The backup team leader didn't lower his weapon. His eyes swept the scene, the kneeling woman, the scattered equipment, the crowd of recording phones. This was the moment when everything would change. When assumptions would crumble and reality would assert itself with devastating clarity. The revelation. "What's your name?" the lead backup officer demanded, his voice cutting through the morning air like a warning shot. Sabrina's answer was quiet, almost too quiet for the chaos unfolding around her. But in that silence, every word carried the weight of absolute authority.
"I am Sabrina Hartley," she said, her voice even and untouched by anger. "Commander of Naval Systems Command." There was a pause, long enough for the wind to cut across the dock, for one of the younger backup officers to squint and look down at the
discarded ID card lying half buried in shadow near the boat. The officer picked it up. His face went pale as he read. He looked to his commanding officer, no words passing between them, just a single silent nod that changed everything. The air itself seemed to shift. Weapons lowered, eyes widened. The lead officer stiffened, blinked
hard, and then, with visible tension in his shoulders, lifted his right hand and delivered a formal salute. Gasps rippled through the crowd.
The woman by the fuel station lowered her phone slightly, realizing what she had just filmed. Someone whispered, "Did he say Commander?" Another voice added, "Holy shit, she's Navy." A backup officer moved to Sabrina's side, cutting the zip ties with a careful swipe of his blade. She didn't flinch as her arms dropped to her sides. The red marks on her wrists told their own story, but she said nothing about them. Instead, she rose slowly, brushing debris from her jacket. Her eyes didn't look at the crowd, didn't even land on the officers around her. She stared out toward the harbor, silent and composed. The man who had saluted her cleared his throat. "Ma'am, But the words faltered. She raised a hand, not to silence him, but to wave off any explanation. There was no confrontation in the gesture, no demand for apology, just acknowledgement that mistakes had been made and would now be corrected. The officers who had arrested her stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. René's mouth opened, but found nothing to say. Targa took a step back as if the shift in air pressure had knocked something loose inside him. Sabrina stepped toward the helm of her vessel, glanced once at the shattered nav-size panel, and then turned back to face the patrol squad. "Secure the perimeter," she said, not loudly, but clearly. "Get the vessel logs uploaded before they're corrupted." And just like that, they moved, without hesitation, without question. The same authority that had been dismissed minutes earlier now commanded instant obedience. The crowd that had once been laughing, once recording her humiliation, now parted in stunned silence. Sabrina didn't ask for recognition or offer speeches. She simply stood in full view, her presence now undeniable. There had been no escalation, no force, only a name. And that name had changed everything, going viral. The first video hit social media by nightfall. 36 seconds of grainy, unbroken footage showing a woman kneeling on a dock, zip-tied and silent, while two officers rifled through her vessel and tossed her belongings into the water. No context, no commentary, just her restraint against their casual brutality. The video went viral within hours. Comments poured in, most expressing outrage at what appeared to be clear police misconduct. But the story was incomplete, leaving viewers with more questions than answers. Then, 12 hours later, a second video followed. This one had sound. It showed the same woman standing with unreadable composure as a Marine patrol unit snapped to attention and saluted. A voice could be heard confirming her name and title, Commander Sabrina Hartley, Naval Systems Command. The response was immediate and explosive. News anchors replayed the moment on loop, breaking it down frame by frame. Commentators asked why no bystanders had intervened. Social media analysts tracked the videos spread across platforms as Thai Commander Hartley began trending globally. Within 24 hours, every major news outlet had picked up the story. But behind the viral noise, something quieter and more significant had begun. Senator Claire Brady, a senior member of the Naval Appropriations Committee, stood before a row of microphones in a navy blue blazer and called for a formal inquiry. "We cannot afford to ignore what this reveals about our institutions," she said, holding up a photo of Sabrina taken during a systems symposium 2 years earlier. "We failed her. We must not fail again." The Office of Naval Integrity received the directive before noon. By 2:00 p.m., Captain Maria Kessler was assigned to the investigation. Known for her precision and absolute intolerance for internal corruption, she arrived at ONI headquarters with a sealed briefcase and a blank report file titled Classified Review Vallon Incident. But the real story was just beginning. As Kessler started pulling records and requesting interviews, a pattern began to emerge, one that suggested Sabrina's treatment wasn't an isolated incident, but part of something much larger and more systematic. The investigation would reveal not just individual misconduct, but institutional rot that had been allowed to fester for years. And at the center of it all sat a woman who had remained silent through her own humiliation, knowing that sometimes the most powerful response is to let others reveal themselves completely. The system exposed, Captain Kessler worked alone for the first 48 hours, requesting unredacted arrest records, dock entry logs, system access traces, and service complaints from the past 2 years at Vallon Harbor. She received everything she asked for and more. Stacked within digital archives were dozens of complaints filed by junior officers and civilians, each pointing to procedural violations, abuse of force, and dismissal of proper identification. Every single complaint had been closed under the same set of signatures, reviewed, deemed non-escalatory. Risk minimal. One name appeared repeatedly in the chain of command, Commander Elise Rowan. At first, the emails seemed routine, brief, coded, bureaucratic phrases designed to avoid scrutiny. Recommend closure. Insufficient escalation. No further review needed. But the pattern was unmistakable. Any complaint involving a female detainee, especially where credentials had been presented, was filtered directly to Rowan's desk. From there, they vanished. Kessler didn't speak to the media or issue early findings, but quietly she began reaching out to officers who had left their posts without explanation. Some replied within hours, others took longer. A few had moved out of state. All had similar stories. They'd witnessed misconduct, reported it, and been isolated or pushed out. Now they wanted back in. The leaks began 3 days after Kessler opened her investigation. Internal memos, redacted arrest reports, chain of command summaries with entire blocks of text blacked out, screenshots of denied transfer requests. The tone of public conversation shifted. This was no longer about one woman on a dock. This was about a system that had silenced dozens like her and counted on no one noticing. When confronted with the evidence, Commander Rowan's carefully constructed defenses began to crumble. The smoking gun came in the form of an email dated 7 months prior, addressed to a deputy enforcement officer. If she resists, book her. If she doesn't, book her anyway. Quiet her that way. The press conference that followed was brief. ONI confirmed significant procedural failures and potential systemic suppression of accountability within select coastal enforcement branches. No names were given, but the message was clear. Investigations were underway. Personnel changes imminent. Senator Brady gave a second statement. What happened at Vallon is not just about one officer's misconduct. It's about what we allowed to harden into habit. We owe Commander Hartley more than an apology. We owe her change. Sabrina made no public comment. She had been contacted, informed, invited to speak. She declined every request. The only public photo of her since the incident showed her walking alone along a dock in Rockshore Naval Quarters, wind in her hair, eyes forward. But the system was no longer still, and neither was she. The final test. The call came during the height of the media storm. A federal courthouse 10 miles inland had been breached. 2 guards were down, hostages confirmed, armed suspect with unknown demands. Within minutes, the harbour fell into lockdown as every available tactical unit scrambled to respond. The officers who had detained Sabrina were benched pending investigation, standing uselessly behind the fueling shed while their colleagues rushed toward real crisis. But as chaos erupted around the emergency response, Sabrina moved with quiet purpose toward the command van. Inside, confusion ruled, maps scattered, operators arguing over comm frequencies, screen feeds flickering between exterior courthouse, shots and blurry thermal scans. Someone shouted about rerouting drone coverage. Sabrina said nothing as she stepped inside, selected a plate carrier from the gear rack, and slipped it on like habit. No one stopped her. No one questioned her presence. She sat at the communications console as if she belonged there. The primary operator was mid-call with a SWAT team leader when she reached forward and tapped mute. "He's bluffing," she said quietly. "Watch his pacing, 12-second intervals. He's reading from a written demand list." The operator blinked, still breathless from shouting. "Who are you? Run facial recognition against defense personnel," she continued calmly. "He's former transport. Look at his wrist, removal scars from cuff protocol. Start with dishonorable discharges." Keys clicked. The feed shifted. A match flashed across the screen. Former military contractor, paroled, known instability. Sabrina leaned into the microphone and began to speak. "Jackson Miller, you're surrounded. No one's hurt yet. You still have a choice." Her tone didn't waver. "Let them go. You know how this ends. It's up to you how it sounds." The room went still. The instructor near the door froze halfway into his flak jacket. Two senior officers stopped talking mid-sentence. 2 paces left. "Good. Set the gun down slow." The feed showed the gunman's shoulders shift. 1 step, then another. The weapon hit the floor. "Move in now," she said. Seconds later, SWAT entered. No shots, no blood. The hostages filed out with hands raised. The suspect dropped to his knees. It was over in less than 4 minutes. Inside the van, no one spoke. Sabrina removed the headset, placed it gently on the console, then stood and adjusted. Her jacket. The blood from the dock incident had long since dried on her sleeves, but it was still visible against the pale touchscreen she'd operated without hesitation. She stepped outside into calmer wind. Word spread fast. Operators from nearby units turned to watch her leave. One saluted before he realized what he was doing. Another followed. From behind the fuel shed, René and Tager watched in silence. No jeering now, no smirking. Just the dawning recognition of what they had tried to break and failed to even bend. Sabrina kept walking, passing the dock edge where her satchel had been tossed and never recovered. She didn't look for it. She didn't need to. In the span of an hour, she had gone from prisoner to commander, but she hadn't changed. She had simply revealed what had always been there. She had done exactly what she came to do: test systems, evaluate, performance measure response under pressure. This time, it hadn't been software being tested. It had been people, and they had failed until she took control. 3 months later, the sun was high but soft, gold sliding across the water in long bands as Sea Whisper drifted beyond the shoreline. Sabrina sat near the stern, coiling rope, with quiet rhythm, her jacket off and sleeves rolled up. The faint lines on her wrists had faded but never quite disappeared. Reminders she no longer minded. Her 8-year-old niece sat on the port bench with a small fishing rod, feet dangling above the surface. Her sister hummed a gentle tune from the bow, too familiar to name, but perfect for the moment. When the fish tugged the line, her niece gasped with delight. Sabrina moved slowly to her side, kneeling with ease, guiding the girl's hands with her own. "Let it pull, then ease it in," she said softly. They hauled in the fish, small, silver, beautiful.
In the sunlight. Her niece whooped with joy as Sabrina carefully removed the hook, held the fish steady for one last look, then lowered it back into the sea. "Why do you like being on the boat so much?"
Her niece asked, suddenly curious and innocent. Sabrina didn't answer right away. She looked around at the water, the light, the silence they were allowed to share. "Because it's honest," she said finally. "It doesn't care who you are, only how you
"Move." The girl nodded, not quite understanding but content. They stayed out until the sun touched the horizon.
Sabrina adjusted the ropes one last time, turned the boat slowly toward home, and let Sea Whisper ease into the current. The hum of water filled the space between their words. She didn't need applause. She didn't want headlines. She had already won, not by rising louder, but by never kneeling when it mattered most. In a world quick to speak and slow to listen, her silence had become the loudest truth in the room, and sometimes that's exactly what victory looks like. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.